Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. This is Dan Turchin, CEO of Insight Finder, the executive chairman of PeopleRain, and host of AI and the Future of Work. You know, we take for granted that when we buy stuff online, our payments are secure and our transactions are processed and it's fast. We've moved from a cash-based economy to a digital one in the blink of an eye. What you may not appreciate is the complexity of the system that makes it all work. What you may also not appreciate is the complexity of the system that is fighting for your attention and your loyalty. We live in a spectacularly complex era when new financial technologies emerge and implode and sometimes go supernova almost weekly. You've all read about the headlines and used products from whether it's Stripe or Square or Plaid or many others. You may not know what it is they do. You're also probably aware of how they're all competing for access and endorsements from a few major payment processors. Names like Visa and MasterCard, American Express, etc. The future of money is clearly digital, and it really is a small handful of companies that are teaching us about that future every day. Now, today's guest is at the forefront of the digitization of money. He's been responsible for many of the highest profile campaigns that get you excited about what's ahead. Curtin was most recently the Chief Brand and Innovation Officer of Visa after having spent the previous decade plus in related roles at HP and at Disney, my alma mater. We talk each week about technology and the future of work and life. Well, there's nobody who's closer to the front lines than Chris. But that's about enough from me. I'm now thrilled to welcome Chris Curtin to the podcast. Chris, why don't you share a little bit more about your background and how you got into this mess?
I liked hearing your description. I thought you did very well. Look, I've worked for three different companies representing three different categories of the economy and the market, specifically entertainment and media at Disney, and then technology at Hewlett Packard, and then more recently financial services with Visa. And you know, the common binding amongst all three companies and categories is that, you know, each of them is a brand. And a brand is effectively a perception. And Steve Jobs said it well, a brand is what they say about you when you're not in the room. And when you deconstruct a brand, there's three core components, one of which is who you've been, the second of which is who you are, and the third of which, and perhaps most important for currently, particularly for current employees, is where you're going and who you're going to become. And I think each of these companies is working their level best independently, but also on behalf of a category that they're leading to architect where the category and where their leadership of it is going. And I think in the instance of payments, so much action and activity is focused on making things not only secure but frictionless, and making it as easy as a swipe of a card has been for the past 50 years, but now in the e-commerce space and the m-commerce space, and of course in the ever-growing Internet of Things space. And this may have been an interesting and intriguing area pre-COVID, but as a result of COVID and everyone being domiciled effectively in their home, it's an existential opportunity and it's an existential challenge if these companies don't get it right.
You and I were catching up offline and we kind of opened the Disney time capsule, and I was really impressed by some of the stories that you were sharing. What's your proudest achievement at work?
I think, in the instance of Disney, so much effort was applied on taking people from the ordinary to the extraordinary. And that was effectively the premise of the brand, whether that occurred through motion pictures or whether that occurred through franchises or television series or scripted programming, or if that occurred in one of the destination businesses. It was effectively taking someone from the ordinary to the extraordinary. And I think Michael Eisner, who was the CEO for most of the time that I was there, but also Bob Iger, started a program called Disney Dimensions. And one element of Disney Dimensions was to take a number of emerging stars and young executives kind of throughout every part of the Walt Disney Company over an intense kind of 8-day pack up your bags, get on the road trip. And you would literally see under the proverbial hood of the company all of the different inner workings. And I thought one particularly moving kind of moment for me was when they took executives and they asked executives to effectively see the life through the eyes of a character. And when you did so, you could really honestly see the magic come to life. And look, lots of companies have in their missions and purposes going from the ordinary to the extraordinary. Until you see the look of a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old or 8-year-old looking up at a character, you don't fully appreciate it. And once you do, you immediately get it. And the best is you yourself revert back to that very age, and you get that innocence, and you get that frankly that magic comes back so naturally. And I think it's wonderful to be able to work for a company and represent a brand that you can also feel and you can touch and you can appreciate and you can see kind of come to life in the way in which you would hope it could and would.
I loved your definition of brand. With the introduction of all of these new digital channels, what is changing about how brands engage consumers?
Yeah, I think brands need to be liquid. I think that they need to be the same experience in every channel. And I think that at times marketers in particular can morph to try to be endemic to the channel as opposed to think through like what is the experience our company should have in a particular interaction, but it should be consistent. And I know, for instance, when we thought about close to 7 years ago, an analysis of Visa in the context of the digital world and in the context of the physical world, there were certain depictions and descriptions that we would apply to a transaction that would occur bearing the 4 letters of Visa in the physical world that I'm not sure you would describe the same way in the online world. So in the instance of the physical world, it would have been a swipe of a card and you would be on your way. In the instance of the e-commerce world, again, rewinding the videotape close to 7 years, you would have had to fill in shipping information, billing information. You would have had to flip the card and inputted a CCV or security code. It was a friction-filled experience. And so for me, when you look at that, both of them are Visa transactions, but they are remarkably different Visa transactions. And I believe that the world's best marketers are ones who sit back and say, yes, we can go off and advertise. Yes, we can go off and create demand. But at points when you interact with our product, our solutions, our services, or our brand itself, that's really the moment you should care about the most. That is, the moment where your company comes to life. And that is where you are leaving a brand impression. And those, you should have kind of a zero tolerance for getting those wrong. And the world's best companies, I think, take that approach.
In Silicon Valley, we very casually throw around the cliche about every brand, every company being digital first. Is that accurate from your perspective?
I think it's a good moniker and kind of filter through which you can apply decisions and actions and kind of test whether you're meeting the mark. You certainly don't want to be digitally last in in this world, but there are companies that I think are kind of slow to the migration and slow to the transformation and kind of slow to kind of fast followers, even if they are leaders. And I think they're going to end up regretting it. And I think, in the instance of COVID, we've seen companies like Shopify who have effectively said that they've seen in 2 or 3 quarters what they had once predicted would have taken 10 to 12 years in terms of category and consumer change and adoption. And I think that's going to continue. I think there's a element of behaviors that have changed as a result of COVID and will be particularly magnified during COVID. And I think that there's also behaviors that are going to stick with us beyond COVID, that people are going to sit back and look backwards and say, I can't believe you guys ever did that. Like, why would you have done that? Why would you have sent 150 people on an airplane for 12 hours to do an internal meeting? What was the logic, in that respect? I think traffic, things like that, people are going to really scratch their head about and say, wait a minute, it took you 90 minutes to get to work. Why? And I'm hoping that those realities will become kind of just the bedrock of a future workplace and future improvements to the way in which we actually show up.
You're telling me this great story about Visa and its sponsorship of the Olympics. Yeah, I'd like our audience to hear. Talk us through that journey and how you ended up winning the sponsorship.
Well, I think some of these properties that are kind of best in breed, they pick you as much as you pick them. I think it is really, really important that some of the best global properties in the world, be they in sports or be they in, motion picture, like the Academy Awards, that they're very mindful of the brands that they're affiliated with. I mean, I'm stuck to the television right now watching the Masters, and it's clear to me that as a viewer, that the Masters has been very, very intentional, not just about the companies with whom they affiliate, but how those companies come to life in a way that dignifies the brand and the experiences known to the consumers and to the golfing world as the Masters. It's the pinnacle of that sport. And I think the Olympics, and the IOC are just the exact same way. They're very careful about who they select and who they intend to partner with, in part because I think that they value the in-kind experience that comes from these partnerships. I think in the instance of Visa, the International Olympic Committee is and was convinced, based on our track record, but more importantly, based on our vision, of what the company, what Visa could specifically do to architect new physical and digital payment experiences that would enhance the fan experience, whether that was fans at home or fans who found their way to the Olympic venue itself. And then finally, surrounding all of that as a legacy to the host nation. And the legacy cannot be, brownfields or empty stadiums and mothballs kind of going through them. The legacy needs to be that the Olympics leaves Japan far better than it found it, leaves China far better than it found it, France, the United States, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what makes it so magical and so theatrical, because it's the world coming together to expose the best of humanity, but also to leave in and through kind of a context of legacy, something that's a gift to that city for having hosted them.
Now we're talking about you as a brand leader, and you've talked about some iconic ones, whether it's the green jacket or Five Rings. The iconic Walt Disney signing of Mickey's name or of his own name. All things that in an instant any consumer can identify with. But you're also a people manager, and I'm curious to hear, in your own words, what's your leadership style, given that you've been around so many iconic leaders?
Well, I think leadership and leaders, which I think is very distinguishable, matters a lot. The person for whom and to whom you report, and the person who runs an organization, I just don't think you can underestimate the importance of that on your day-to-day life and on the future of the company. I'm a big subscriber in the impact that they can have, and on your own professional career, but also on the company's trajectory. My definition of leadership is actually not my definition of leadership. It's the CEO of Microsoft came and spoke to one of our meetings, and someone asked him what was his definition of leadership, and he paused and he thoughtfully responded. He said, it's not your title. It's not the number of people who report to you. It's not your budget. It's not even the amount of revenue that you've signed up for on behalf of the company. Instead, it's people who bring energy and focus to places where none exist. And when I heard that, I was hoping on my best days that's me, but even not, even on days when I'm not at my best, it's definitely my definition. And I've seen leadership occur from every title station in a corporation, every age, every demographic. I personally like to hire and develop and surround myself with people that I call human Swiss Army knives, people who are able to do any number of things well, who have a bias towards action, who have a natural hardwiring against curiosity that includes curiosity, who have a healthy cocktail of confidence, but also humility. Confidence in that they will be able to learn something, they will be able to master something, and they will be able to go do the due diligence and put in the sweat equity and to find an answer that they don't naturally possess. But humility in the sense of asking others for their points of view, seeking that out, and frankly, soliciting it. All too often in meetings, particularly in big corporations, people gravitate to the highest titled person in the room. And it becomes kind of a bad academic setting where you're just regurgitating what you think the teacher is looking for in the exam, as opposed to offering kind of original thinking, original interpretation, original analysis. And I really believe that some of the healthiest companies are kind of like a liberal arts education. It's a marketplace of ideas. And even if your idea doesn't end up becoming the prevailing idea, it's strengthened by your colleagues' ideas, even if they challenge it. But what you shouldn't allow for, or you should at least discourage, is, the meeting after the meeting before the meeting, the whisper in the hallway. Those dynamics you want to throttle down. And my final point on this, in terms of leadership and why it's, I think, so important, is every small company wants to be big, and every big company wants to be small. And what you're trying to do is find that sweet middle. You're trying to find the elements of big that you love, such as a brand, such as potentially business or societal impact, but you're also trying to maintain the things of small that allow for magic to happen, where people feel like their work and their work product is causal to the success of the company, not just correlated to it.
Speaking of magic, everyone who's on, we'll call it the wrong side of innovation, always feels like technology is at its maturest state. And those of us, I think one of the things that's beautiful about the spirit of Silicon Valley is that we believe just the opposite. We're constantly restless, and we constantly see things as they could be or should be, regardless of how mature they might seem now. Talk to us about the future of money. Are the days of cash, paper, and even credit or plastic numbered? What comes next?
Well, I think that, first of all, I think choice will continue to be a dominant theme. So if societies or individuals choose to use cash or choose to use different fiat currencies, I think, that will be up to them, and obviously the governments that hopefully they elect into office. So I think that will be the governing principle about it. But surrounding all of that, I think it's just tons of healthy innovation. Personally, I'm of the view that moving money, or better yet, moving value around the world, should be as easy as moving an emoji, or easy as moving a meme, or a silly cat video, or a photo of you with your buddies. I'm not quite sure why we have made certain expression very, very easy, very, very borderless, and in some ways the economics of it cost neutral, and in other instances kind of moving value around expensive, cumbersome, and maybe even at points dangerous. It just strikes me as a kind of antiquated approach. And I think, sadly, the ones who are the most under and ill served by that kind of structure are the developing nations, or the and represented amongst us. And that part, I think, is really, really troubling, and I think could be substantially improved. And it's not some kind of like master architecture, by a few bankers and kind of wood paneled conference rooms in New York. I think at the end of the day, if you can send a photo to Botswana, I'm not sure why you can't send money to Botswana and vice versa, and why we shouldn't create a marketplace that allows for it and secures it and makes it easy and frictionless.
What's one thing that you think is a way that technology will infiltrate our lives, let's say in short time horizon, 2 to 4 years, that today might just seem absurd, but will be commonplace?
I happen to believe, and I'm not sure. I have to check my statement on this because I'm not sure whether it's I hope it occurs or I believe it will occur, but it's somewhere in between the two. I think we're at the cusp of the smarter home. I think that, with Siri and with Alexa, with smarter refrigerators in part coming out from the likes of LG and Samsung, and with so many people being at home all around the world, I have to believe that the focus will now kind of tilt towards what can we do to up level the services and experiences within the home such that it's as rewarding as it possibly can be, such that it predicts your needs and fulfills them as quickly as possible. I think if your milk is about to perish, I think we'll see a day very, very soon where there'll be a very dynamic and engaging, message that comes on your smart refrigerator saying, hey, you're 24 hours from that happening. Do you want milk delivered tomorrow morning? And do you want it paid and on a instrument that you've already stored? And I think that's just but one example of what could come. And I could layer on top of that, partnerships with the Cameos of the world, where you get your favorite celebrity or your favorite athlete to come in and have that very same message. And I can already see it happening in my own home. We have 3 daughters. Each of them has their kind of sanctioned off or cordoned off Wi-Fi zone. Each of them has a monitor. Each of them has their PC device. Each of them is doing a blend of school and kind of socialization through it. And I just feel like it's not going to be long until all of it's really integrated. All of it's a lot smarter. All of it's a lot more reactive. And, people can just walk through their home a la Tony Stark and have an experience that we might look back at 2019 and 2018 and say, gosh, that was prehistoric.
I'll plug a great episode that we did recently with Alex Caposalatro, who's the CEO of Josh.ai. And it's about the future of the home. And I loved how he talks about these devices entering your home almost like members of the family, and how both hard it is to get your device adopted as this kind of extra member of the family, and how much of a responsibility is on the part of the vendor, whether it's Amazon, Google, Josh.ai, et cetera, to be a good steward of your data. But fascinating glimpse into a lot of, what you're talking about, the future of the smart home.
I mean, I to just build on that. I mean, I see a world where, you can be in a living room and you could have a AI driven experience with Stephen Ambrose telling you the story of World War II, or Edison talking about electricity, or someone from Headspace talking to you about meditation, and you could literally go through those different experiences. It'd almost be like having a cocktail party at your home and having some of the best people in the world be there. And so many people have said, if you could have a cocktail party, you could have anyone come who was dead or alive, who would it be? And people say, well, I'd take the Barack Obama and I would take the Pope, and I think you could have them. I think it might not be a parlor game in the future. I think there's a chance that you could have them, or a representation of them that in many respects feels authentic, feels genuine. And as it gets sharper and more sophisticated, perfects itself through interaction. And and you walk, and for sure you could see this happening in the culinary space. For sure you could see it happening as a pre-party to the Super Bowl. But I think you could have it on any given Friday night, or you could have Coldplay come in and perform inside your home in a way that is tailored to you and interacts, more specifically with you.
I want a holographic Ben Franklin at my Thanksgiving table.
We had one of our most famous marketing promotions at Disney was we did a partnership with Verizon, where if a parent ultimately had booked a Disney vacation, they could select any number of Disney characters who would ultimately call on, let's just say, Christmas morning, and tell the family that they were going to Walt Disney World. And that could have been Mickey Mouse, it could have been Donald Duck, could have been Goofy. And, that was 15 years ago, and it was off the charts in terms of success. And I think if you think about that moving forward to the type of technology we have today, I just don't think it's a stretch to think through how do you import all of these experiences and all of this intellectual property and all of this richness, if you will, of life into your home in a way that's specific to your family's interests and needs, and kind of rewards everyone in the ecosystem.
I don't know if you've seen the experiments Live Nation is doing with VR concerts, where you enter a VR stadium and it's a live concert with your favorite band, but completely in VR world.
Yeah.
It's clearly the future of, quote, live events. So Chris, we're about out of time, but I can't let you get away without answering one last question for me. Your advice to a younger version of Chris.
My advice to a younger version of Chris, and there's more and more runway as to the younger version of Chris definition with each day. I would say that you do want to have one life on the accelerator and one foot on the accelerator and 1 foot on the brake in life. And I think that for a lot of people, including myself, you can get so focused on generating and pursuing what's next. And I don't mean just by career or, ambition. I'm also talking about, you have an objective and you're focused on it, and that is going to, either matriculate or not, but you're going to do everything within your energy to make it happen. And, I think that's awesome, and it can create a lot of positive energy for you and for those around you and for your teams. But I also think, enjoying the ride is something that's really, really important, and figuring out the way to do all of that, but make it enjoyable for yourself and for everyone involved, including those who are not, professionally there with you. You want your family to come along on that ride as well, your loved ones to come along on that ride as well. And so kind of getting that balance right, where you can be a type A professionally, but you can also be a type A personally, in the sense of harvesting the best out of life. I know, we had, some of the smartest people in the world, at Disney at one point, speak to some of our leading executives. And one thing that I think it was Danny Hillis said, who was one of the fathers of artificial intelligence. He said, be careful, because you're going to spend all of your life trying to accumulate, wealth and responsibility that matches your abilities and your talent and your intellect and all the rest, and frankly rewards it, to only find yourself kind of at the latter end of your life with having to redivert those dollars to extend your life, because you weren't able to enjoy it, as much as you could have or would have during the course of when you were healthy and able and capable of going all over the world and doing everything else you might want to do. So I just think getting that balance right is extremely important in life.
Chris, this has been so much fun. We've done a lot of prognosticating. Maybe could we have you back for a second version of this, and we can test some of our assertions here?
I would love it. I would have me back in 15 or 20 years, and we can see if
there you go.
Right.
You and me and a virtual Ben Franklin. How about that?
That would be awesome.
Good stuff, Chris. Well, this has been another episode of AI and the Future of Work. I am Dan Turchin, your host. And again, thanks to Chris Curtin. This is a great conversation. And stay tuned. We'll be back next week with another fascinating guest.